CDs sound better than most streaming services. There's a good reason for that too, but that's a conversation for a whole different video. First, what we need to talk about is the big problem with CDs. Streaming services are available anywhere that you've got a phone and mobile reception. CDs are only available where you've got your discs and a CD player. It's a good thing then that companies like FiiO are now making fantastic portable CD players. You'll still have to take care of the CDs. The fascination that we audiophiles have with spinning things is really interesting. People have invented better formats of audio only to revert to spinning discs of vinyl, spinning spools of magnetic tape, or spinning discs of reflected plastic. The reality is that most vintage formats are objectively worse in many ways, and yet they're also more fun. They're also somehow more special. I recently tried to get on board with the resurgence of vinyl, but that didn't really grab me. I didn't even bother with cassettes, and I don't plan to. CDs though? CDs I get. A mini-disc resurgence would be even better, but don't get me going on that topic. Back to CDs. I understand the appeal. They're like a record, but they're less fiddly. They produce a sound that's often better than records too, unless you're playing at the high end of vinyl with very carefully chosen pressings. CDs also make portability possible, and that is where this comes into play. The DM13 is a $150 portable CD player, much like the Discman or equivalent that you probably cherished as a kid. Mine was with me for every car ride, bus ride, or holiday stay in a hotel somewhere. Flicking open the lid of the DM13 and pressing down the disc until it clicks onto the spool brought back all kinds of memories from my childhood. Don't think that this is just a copy of one of those old players though. The DM13 does a whole lot more than anything I remember them doing. On the other hand, if you're new to the hobby and you don't have a memory of portable CD players, you might just be surprised at what the DM13 can do. The $150 version of the DM13 can play CDs, but you probably guessed that bit. It also has unbalanced and balanced headphone outputs, and it can even output the digital stream from the CDs via an optical or coaxial connection to send the signal onto a high-quality external hi-fi system or dedicated DAC. That's going to turn the DM13 into a CD transport instead of a CD player. That's already pretty cool and way better than anything I had as a kid, but we're still not done. If you spend just $10 more, you can get the Bluetooth versions of the DM13, and that can then transmit the CD playback via Bluetooth using the high-quality aptX HD codec. It's not going to sound quite as good as a wired connection, of course, but now you can have your CD player on your coffee table with no wires attached, but you can be listening via your hi-fi system or a pair of wireless earphones or headphones. Change the discs whenever you want, and you've never even left the couch. Or, of course, you could have your DM13 on your kitchen bench, away from the sink please, while you listen to your wireless headphones and cook up a feast. If you're a very patient person, the DM13 has even one more trick up its sleeve. Regardless of which version you buy, the non-Bluetooth or the Bluetooth version, the DM13 can also rip your CDs into a digital file format. That can either go direct to a computer or onto a thumb drive. You do need to be patient though, because it's all going to be done in real time. There's no high-speed ripping of FLAC files here, only real-time recording of the playback files into WAV files on a thumb drive or a computer. The quality is going to be perfect, but it's a bit clumsy and a bit slow. You'll also need to manually manage all of the tagging of the files, so the album name, the artist name, each of the individual track titles. You'll need to do all of that later yourself as well. So that's going to add more time and hassle to the process. Personally, I would never use that feature. It's too much of a hassle, but maybe it'll be helpful to you. Enough about features though. You probably want to know, does the DM13 sound any good? Yep, sure does. And so until next time, happy listening. No, I'm just kidding. There's a bit more we need to discuss here. For example, is there any benefit to buying the DM13 and carting your CDs around with you, or should you just buy a dongle and plug it into your smartphone? Can the DM13 be a good quality portable player and a desktop grade or hi-fi grade CD transport? Let's unpack all that a bit. I tested the DM13 in a few ways. If it's going to be a relevant portable option, given its size and the need to carry CDs, then it has to sound better in my opinion than a similarly priced dongle connected to a smartphone. A dongle like, for instance, the KA15, also from FiiO. And the good news is that the DM13 kind of does sound better, but that's not a resounding vote of confidence, is it? Stick with me here. The KA15 has a smoother and slightly more relaxed sound than the DM13, and that more relaxed sound is going to be preferable on some headphones. On the other hand though, the DM13 offers better separation of sounds, better image focus, and a better overall sense of clarity. It's an incremental improvement only, but it is a step better in my opinion than the KA15. I'd say it's just a little bit more technically capable. One area that the DM13 is vastly superior to the KA15 though, is that it physically connects you with your music. You have to handle the music to play the music. And that means the process of playing an album on the DM13 is a very conscious and physical one. You think about which disc to play because it takes more effort to change it. You feel the actual disc as you take it out of the case. And then you see the disc as you're placing it in the DM13. It's a more intimate listening experience, to be sure. If you're happy to have less choice, maybe you're glad to have less choice, taking the DM13 and a selection of CDs with you can be a wonderful portable music experience that's as good or maybe slightly better than a comparably priced dongle. It's also surprisingly just as robust, almost. It took me a huge amount of effort to disrupt playback from the DM13. You could probably take this for a jog, not that I'm recommending it. And on that note, something I don't understand about the DM13 is that there's an ESP switch on the back, which is their anti-skip protection. Having that switched on creates a buffer of the music inside the device so that if the read process is interrupted by a jolt or a bang, it's already got some music stored to give it time to reread the disc before you hit that part of the music. It has no impact on the sonic quality of what's coming out of the DM13, so I don't really understand why you would ever want to switch it off. But the choice is there, and perhaps it has a very minor impact on the battery life of the DM13. Another switch on the back of the DM13 is desktop mode. It also has no impact on the sonic performance. What it does do though is let you run the DM13 from an external power supply via a USB-C connection, and that means you can run the DM13 all day, every day, without degrading the life of the internal battery. That's what potentially could make the DM13 an excellent compact desktop CD solution. In that type of setup, you might be using the DM13 to drive directly into your headphones or outputting to some sort of external DAC, headphone amp, or speaker amp. If you're using headphones, you'll be pleased to know that both the 4.4mm and the 3.5mm outputs from the DM13 both sound equally fantastic. But they are different circuits. The 3.5mm circuit is an unbalanced circuit, and the 4.4mm circuit is a balanced circuit. And that means that the 4.4mm output can deliver a lot more power, up to 660 milliwatts into a 32ohm headphone, so it's going to drive all but the hardest headphones. The 3.5mm output being unbalanced isn't as powerful, but it still sounds great, so you can use either without any sonic disadvantage. That is, other than the disadvantage of the 4.4mm socket feeling horribly vague when you plug into it, at least on my unit. The first time I plugged a 4.4mm connection into the DM13, it just felt a bit squishy and a bit vague. There was a definite final click as the plug seated into the socket, but the journey in was far less confidence inspiring. Thankfully, the sound out of the socket is great, and repeated connections and disconnections showed that the socket works perfectly. It just didn't feel wonderful. As I resumed testing the DM13 to put it up against a dedicated desktop player in the SMSL PL200, I discovered something else that's really cool about the DM13. It has disk memory. That means when you return to playing a disc after stopping it, the DM13 is going to remember where you got up to, and it will even do that if you've removed that disc in the meantime. No doubt there'll be a limit to the number of discs it can remember, But I like the fact that if you've been listening maybe during a commute and then you want to resume that album on the way home, it's going to know not only the track you finished on, but the time within that track that you were up to. So I thought that was pretty cool, but let's get back to the sound. Using headphone sockets only here, I tested the DM13 up against the SMSL PL200, so essentially using them as dedicated CD players. Whether you feed the line outputs of these into an external amplifier or active speakers or direct to headphones, what we're learning here is how these perform as dedicated players, not using an external DAC. And as you'd probably expect from a much more expensive and full-size device, the PL200 does sound a little bit more nuanced and detailed than the DM13. But the DM13 isn't too far behind. It's definitely not $500 behind, and that's the price difference. That extra $500 does get you a bit more separation and layering in the sound, but it's not a huge jump. And so it's really encouraging to hear that the DM13 at just $150 or $160 gets as close as it does to an over $600 CD playback device. And that should bode really well for the DM13 acting as a transport. In other words, when we use an external DAC. Some will assume that these two CD spinners would have to sound identical when used as transports because they're just sending a digital stream out to a DAC. Surely they should sound identical. I still don't understand how this comes to be, but you can hear that the DM13 is just a little bit less resolving as a transport than the PL200. The sound is all just a little bit less clean from the DM13. It's no doubt got something to do with the quality of the timing or maybe even noise in the system from the PL200 compared to the DM13, but I'm going to leave that to the keyboard warriors to debate down below. You'd already begun, hadn't you? Listening to Scheherazade with the decoding and the amplification all being handled externally by a super high-end audio chain, the full orchestra as it bursts to life at around 2 minutes lacked a little bit of realism, texture and detail from the DM13 when compared to the PL200. I did double and triple check myself on this one because it still doesn't make complete sense to me no matter how many times I hear a transport make a difference. But the differences were undeniable. Everything just sounded a little bit less crisp, clean, and separated from the DM13 when compared to the PL200. But it was still bugging me. Did they really sound different as transports? This album sounded brilliant from the DM13. But there's just a certain something that's better from the PL200. There's better definition of individual sounds, better separation of those sounds. The music is all just a touch more real and a touch more lifelike. But again, the differences are subtle. Again, it's not $500 different. The DM13 still sounded excellent, and that's where its value lies. You can't take the PL200 with you on the road. You can't play a CD in the PL200 in your armchair without having a power cable draped across your lap. You also can't get the PL200 for $150. And so if you want a portable and versatile CD player and transport, the FiiO DM13 is brilliant. If you want to explore CDs without dipping too much money into the hobby, the DM13 is brilliant. I've got links in the description down below so you can get into the action if you want to. Or if you do want to commit heavily and get right into CD playback and get excellent quality sound without spending a fortune, then watch my video up here next about the SMSL PL200 to understand why it's my player and transport of choice for those times where nostalgia overpowers logic and pragmatism. But for now, a huge thanks to YouTube channel members, a huge thanks to channel Patreon members, and of course to those of you who leave super thanks on videos like this one. And until next time, happy listening, be kind to each other, and I'll see you here again soon on Passion for Sound.